Welcome to Tantrum House Studio D. I'm Kevin Delp.
And I'm Melissa Delp.
Today we're looking at the top 10 board game prototypes that launched a Kickstarter in 2017 that we personally reviewed.
A lot of great games came out on Kickstarter in 2017. The ones we're talking about are just ones that we personally reviewed, not even other people in our company.
But before we get into our top 10, I did want to mention our number 11. We didn't personally review it, but we were able to play a copy of Dice Hospital by Alley-Cat Games. Will and Sarah actually reviewed it.
Right, and this game has a really interesting theme with a hospital and you're trying to cure patients, which are actually dice. And you have these cute little doctor meeples that you're sending to different rooms in your hospital to treat either the colors of the dice or certain numbers. And you're trying to get your dice up to like number 7 to be able to discharge them. And if you can get lots of them together and discharge at the same time, you'll get lots of points. So
yeah, because they're 6-sided dice. So once you basically past 6, the patient is healed. Or once they go below 1, then they're
Kevin
dead.
Had some dice
No.
in his board.
I only played this one time. I was trying to save the dice, trying to save the people from dying. My soul was like went out to these people.
So he kept taking the low dice, which then just got sicker and sicker and eventually
I did
died.
enjoy it. It just had some really cool decisions that you're making throughout the game. So big 2 thumbs up to Dice Hospital.
Number 10.
My number 10 is Circle the Wagons by Button Shy Games. They're known for their wallet-sized games. I think they've actually published about 25 different wallet-sized games. I like this one because of the cool circle of cards that you place in the middle of the table. I enjoy the different goals in the game, and even how you build your tableau in front of you. It's a quick, fun, easy 2-player game.
My number 10 is Grim Forest by Druid City Games. The fairy tale theme and the beautiful art is what really drew me in. And then there are some really interesting choices about which locations you choose to go to and even when you play your cards. Now, there is a little bit more interaction and a little more take that.
A little bit.
Yeah, than I prefer, and that's why it's a little lower on the list and didn't make it higher.
One of our friends enjoyed it so much that he actually went out and backed it right away after he played it at our house.
Yeah, so we are looking forward to playing it again.
Number 9. My number 9 is King's Champion by Talon Strike Studios. This is another 2-player game. It's a medium-heavy worker placement dice game. You are in charge of a group of knights, and you're trying to upgrade them throughout the game to try to defeat your opponents. I love the art, the theme, and the gameplay for this one.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of had a unique feel to it. My number 9 is Gearworks by Peacekeeper Games. It has a Sudoku feel. It's very puzzly. You're trying to lay cards into a grid and there's rules about what can go in the certain columns and rows. And you're even doing a little bit of math to try to get sparks, which are powerful and help you do extra things. Now this game has a steampunk theme and feel in all of the artwork. There's gear cards and gear tokens and part tokens. And then there are these contraptions that you're trying to build. And they have a really cool Da Vinci style diagram, blueprint, sketch feel to the art.
I think the steampunk theme really drew in not just us, but all the members of Tantrum House. I think they really liked that part of the game, or just that whole theme.
So we really enjoyed Gearworks. Number 8.
Dwarven Smithy by Flatworks Gaming. Now in this game, you're trying to collect the right resources, refine them, so that you can craft awesome dwarven items like swords and shields and armor. And once you can get your head around how the timing works, you can really do some cool things.
Right, because you have limits, like a hand limit and a limit of how many cards you can put into your workshop and your market and the other places. So you could think that you're getting ready to do this awesome thing and then realize you're one card too many. So you have to wait until the next turn to actually craft your item. Now, my number 8 is actually also on Kevin's list. It's a little higher, so I am not going to mention it now, and I'll let him talk about it when it appears.
Number 7. My number 7 is Oaxaca. You're collecting the best crafts and you're putting them in your market stall. Now you're rolling dice throughout the game, and you're activating cards. And you definitely are trying to build up your engine to do well in this game.
Now, this one didn't make it on my list because I felt like once I got my engine running, the game was over. So I would have preferred that there would have been a few more rounds in the game to really feel satisfied with just what was going on. Now, my number 7 is also one that's on Kevin's list.
I just liked it so much better.
So we're going to delay it till we hit it on his number. Number 6.
My number 6 is Mars Open by Bellwether Games.
Now, this one was my number 8.
So in Mars Open, you're actually playing a game of golf on your tabletop, and you have this like cardboard token that you're flicking around as like the golf ball, and you're trying to put it into the hole that's just like this little hole in the box cover, which is really cool. So I mean, it's the same rules of golf.
Yeah, there's lots of obstacles and things you're trying to go around.
Yeah. I think this is probably the best dexterity game that launched on Kickstarter in 2017. We had so much fun playing it and so much fun sharing it with bunches of our friends.
Yeah, I also enjoyed it, so it did make my list. I'm just not as favorite. Dexterity isn't as favorite for me.
I love trying to do like the trick shots and things like that.
Kevin. Now, my number 6 is Shifting Realms by Soaring Rhino Games. It is a Euro game. You're collecting resources, you're building buildings, you're trying to complete objectives to finish the game. Now, the interesting thing is it comes with 5 realms.
Yeah, 5 different realms.
But you only play with 3 at a time, so the game is going to be different depending on which realms you choose and even which order that you put them in on the table. And each realm has its own end game objective.
I like that because you're like in order to finish the game, you're trying to complete, or people are trying to complete 2 of the objectives, and depending on which one ends first really depends on how well you do in the game. So I think it's a great Euro game and did develop well on Kickstarter. Number 5. My number 5 is Cytosis from Genius Games.
Now, this is another crossover. This one was my number 7.
It's a worker placement game. It takes place in the human cell. John Covey with Genius Game is known for the science games that he does. You're like building enzymes and hormones and receptors in this game. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, and it basically takes you through the process so you can learn a little bit about
science. You're learning as you're having fun.
Now, my number 5 is Hardback by Fowers Games. And it has 2 of my favorite things. It has words and deck building.
Yes.
I really enjoy that the cards have certain powers on them, but then you can also combo them, kind of like in Star Realms, how the different factions work. There are different genres that stack on each other. And it's also not just about making the longest word or the most interesting word. It's about kind of puzzling together your card powers and getting certain things next to each other or certain bonuses in your words so you can score the most points.
Now, Hardback didn't make my list, but I still enjoyed it. Melissa's such a better wordsmith than I am. I mean, sure, her full-time job is being a writer. But even though I'm not as good as she is, I still enjoyed it because I could focus on that deck building aspect and focus on one of the genres of literature and just make some small words, but still do very well in the game.
Number 4.
So for number 4, we actually picked the same game, Sunset Over Water by Pencil First Games.
Now, I really enjoy Herbaceous, and this game is made by the same team. So I was really interested to try it out. It has simultaneous action selection, it has set collection. The main thing that you're using are these time order cards, and they determine what time you get up, which is your turn order. It determines like where you can go on the grid of cards and how many paintings you can paint, because you're trying to paint landscapes and then turn them in for points to different collectors. So you really have to strategize. Do I want to get up earlier and try to beat everyone but not paint as much? Or do I want to paint a lot and hope that there's actually something still good when it gets to my turn?
I also enjoyed the gameplay for Sunset Over Water. Some of the things that drew me in were the cool artist meeples, the beautiful artwork from Beth Sobel, and even just the gameplay. It was just very peaceful and tranquil. Number 3.
My number 3 is Legends of Sleepy Hollow.
What?
By Greater Than Games and Dice Hate Me Games.
This is my number 2. It's a co-op game designed by Ben Pinchback and Matt Riddle.
Now, it's a story-based game, and you have scenarios. When you finally beat the scenario, you get to open secret packages, you get to advance the story.
It's really cool.
Maybe even find helpful things for your characters to carry on into later stories. So I really enjoy that aspect of the game, kind of the mystery to it. And then it also has a really interesting way that it handles your actions and how often you can take them, and that really builds into the strategy of the game.
If you have ever played Mansions of Madness, either first edition or second edition, you might really like this game. It has that same sort of feel during as the gameplay. Another thing I like are all the different scenarios. I like that there's not just one thing. You play the game and it's done. I like the different scenarios in the game.
Number 2. My number 2 is Legendary Creatures by Pencil First Games.
This was my number 3.
So we had a little flip-flop there. Now, this game is actually a lot heavier than most of the Pencil First games. There's a lot going on in the game.
Yes.
It has some action selection, it had some hand management, some resource management. You have these creatures that you're trying to decide which ones to use.
I really enjoyed it.
It has different realms. You need to activate a realm each turn, and that will determine how it interacts with the creatures and their powers. So you have lots of different choices. You can make combos. You're trying to basically advance on a track with different meeples, which I think is something Kevin really liked.
Yeah, I really like the meeples. I think that might draw people in right away. They'll see this picture of this cool, like, custom meeple, like the flying llama. And he did the same thing. I mean, not the same thing, but in Sunset Over Water, he had cool artist meeples. I think the meeples in Legendary Creatures are even cooler. I really enjoy that. Number 1. So for number 1, we're both in agreement, and we chose Rise to Nobility by Final Frontier Games.
Now, this is a dice worker placement game, which we both enjoy.
Really enjoy those types of games.
And there are lots of ways to score points in this game. There's not one direct path. There's lots of different things you can try. You do have to build an engine so you can get money, so you can buy houses, so you can settle people, so they can then go work for you, which then gives you goods. And it's kind of this building kind of like snowball effect as you go.
I really like the reputation track.
Right. So the reputation track determines how many pips you can actually use. At the beginning of each round, you roll, I think, 5 dice. So you could be rolling, I don't know, like
24. But
or 30.
Or you could roll 6 times 5. You could do 30, which would be highly unlikely. We could do roll really high, but your reputation only starts at, I think, 9.
Right. So you might not be able to place all the dice if you roll a lot of high dice. So it is very interesting, kind of that push and pull of, do I use just a few high dice, or do I use a lot more of my lower dice, because you have that limit of your reputation.
One more thing. Love the artwork. The Miko did the artwork for Rise to Nobility. Awesome.
Now, there were a ton of great games that we reviewed in 2017.
So you can watch them on our channel, Tantrum House YouTube channel.
Right. So if any of these sounded interesting, I know we just kind of touched on them a little bit. You can watch the full reviews. And there were a few more that we just wanted to give some honorable mentions to.
Yeah, some honorable mentions. Zombie Tsunami from Lucky Duck Games. They take apps. Mobile games, and they bring them over into the world of board gaming, and they do a great job. They also tried to kickstart Fruit Ninja. I think they had to cancel that project, but I think they're still going to try and get it out. But Zombie Tsunami is like a dice rolling game, but you're not really rolling dice, you're rolling zombies. So it's a very light and fun game. Another game is Pocket Ops by Grand Gamers Guild. It's a 2-player game, and it sort of reminded me of The Princess Bride.
Yeah, it's actually tic-tac-toe, but you're predicting where the other person would go. And so you get into situations where you know if they go on space E, they'll win the game. But if I can predict where they'll go, then they don't put it down.
Right.
So
and there's some special powers. It's not just tic-tac-toe.
Right.
Each player has like special powers that they can play special like agents to like grapple or push or things like that.
Yeah,
so.
I think this was the most surprising game for me of like, oh, it's going to be tic-tac-toe. But it was actually really fun and really had some tension as a 2-player game that you're trying to do.
Another honorable mention is End of the Trail from Elf Creek Games. It has some like poker mechanic and some like push your luck to it.
Yeah, it had multi-use cards that you're using for multiple things, and you kind of have to decide how you want to use the cards. So I like those choices in games.
And the last honorable mention goes to Tesla versus Edison Duel from Artana Games. They published a very medium heavy game called Tesla versus Edison. That sort of reminded me of like a Power Grid type game. But this was they took some of those sort of, not mechanics, but sort of the theme of Tesla versus Edison and sort of like narrowed it down to a 2-player game. And the duels, like Seven Wonders Duel, they're really hot games right now. I think they did a really good job making Tesla versus Edison Duel.
So yeah, those were our favorite games for this year that we reviewed. A couple honorable mentions. And let us know if you enjoyed any of those games and even if you backed them.
Thank you, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.